Hallo en welkom by Fokus. Ek is Lenet Francis. Later in die program praat ons met 'n kenner oor die stand van onderwys in Suid-Afrika in lig van die regering se nasionale ontwikkelingsplan. Luidens die dokument is onderwys een van 9 uitdagings wat deur die regering geïdentifiseer is. Maar eers die matriekslaagsyfer vir KwaZulu-Natal was verlede jaar 68,1%. Dit is meer as 2% swakker as die slaagsyfer van 2010. Tog is daar 'n groep skole in die provinsie wat stelselmatig hul matriekslaagsyfers sedert 2009 met 17% verbeter het. Die skole het almal een ding gemeen. Hulle hoofde het 'n nuwe bestuurskursus bygewoon en die vaardighede wat die PMDP hulle geleer het, werp duidelik vrugte af. Regisseur Karen Dolwiel en kameraman Jan de Klerk het 2 skole in KwaZulu-Natal besoek. Hier is hul verslag.
So our school got 81% pass rate. So this comes with a certificate that says achieving 80 to 89.99%. We beat them all, okay? I guess it's Sharon Zandla Fort.
Skool of Fikanium Tetwa mag maar 'n bietjie spog. Matrikulante van die Mapinda sekondêre skool het die afgelope 2 jaar hulle slaagsyfers dramaties verbeter en dit omdat hulle hoof self terug skoolbanke toe is. Mapinda is meer as 'n uurse ry van Durban in die platlandse Umgeni Vallei. Inwoners van die gebied is arm. Ouers van leerders hoef nie skoolfooie te betaal nie. Van die leerders moet so ver as 13 km stap om by die skool te kom. Die moeilike omstandighede is herhaaldelik weerspieël in powere matriekslaagsyfers soos die van 2008.
Out of the learners we had, only 29% passed. 2009 was even worse in terms of the results because we had a 12% overall pass rate, which was also very much depressing.
Soveel ander skole in KwaZulu-Natal is in dieselfde bootjie. Performance Solutions Africa het saam met die Universiteit van KwaZulu-Natal en PricewaterhouseCoopers die Departement van Onderwys oortuig om die vaardighede van skoolhoofde op te knap met die PMDP of bestuursontwikkelingsprogram vir skoolhoofde.
Principals assume principalship through promotion. There is no direct training for principalship at the college and at the university, and that causes a problem.
The Principals Management Development Program is a highly applied skills uplifting program designed especially for school principals.
Die PMDP is in 2009 aan 50 skoolhoofde bekendgestel. Fikanium Tetwa was in 2010 een van 600 hoofde wat die kursus bygewoon het.
When I attended the workshop, I had been a principal for about, it was my 10th year as a principal at that time.
Die vaardighede wat bestuurders van enige groot instellings behoort te hê, is vir skoolhoofde in 6 modules in die PMDP saamgevat.
And they are in the areas of financial management, resource management, managing curriculum, especially in the school, planning for the school, as well as school governance issues.
Just remind your parents, please. On Saturday, there will be elections. What elections are we going to have on Saturday? Who will be elected? School Governing Board.
Meneer Mtetwa se verhouding met sy skoolbestuurspan, dis nou die groep onderwysers, het baie verbeter nadat hy die PMDP bygewoon het. Maar hy meen dis veral die module oor die bestuur van sy skool se leerplan wat die meeste vrugte afgewerp het.
So 2010, there was an improvement in terms of we moved from 12% to 50%, which was a 38% improvement. Similarly, last year, which is 2011, there was an improvement from 50% to 81%.
Die skoolhoof van die Madlanga Hoërskool in die Gingindlovu area noord van Durban het tot onlangs ook nie rede gehad om trots te wees op die slaagsyfer van matrieks nie. Nadat Zinhle Ndwalani in 2010 die PMDP bygewoon het, drink die skoolhoof pauses nie meer tee saam met die personeel nie, maar is hy fliks besig met administratiewe werk. Sy meen die PMDP het haar dit geleer wat sy nooit tydens haar diploma en graadkursusse geleer het nie.
Well, there's this public management of finances, and then human resources, which is people management, and curriculum management, because most schools, they just take any subject and put it into the curriculum without considering what the learners will do after matric.
Barbara Njapa meen die bestuursontwikkelingsprogram vir skoolhoofde is suksesvol omdat dit deur die privaat en openbare sektore saam aangebied word.
The private sector is actually bringing funding as well, which complements the funding that comes from the department. But also there's special skills that come from the private sector, and also because we've worked in other industries and sectors, we bring that cross-pollination into the public sector.
Vir skoolhoof in Ndwalani is dit egter belangrik hoe die kruisbestuiving afwendel na haar leerders. Die skool se matriekslaagsyfers spreek van sukses.
Then we went to 2009 with a 31%, to 2010 with a 41%, and then last year it went to 75.6%. And we hope for 85 to 100 this year.
Volgens Zinhle beteken die verbetering in die matriekslaagsyfer baie vir die skool en gemeenskap.
Hopefully, I think it is assisting learners, because I also see the increase in the enrollment this year. There was a little bit an increase. And the attitude of the people that they used to have in the past about the school changed. Then they started bringing some more learners into the school.
Volgens Barbara Njapa het die matriekslaagsyfer van die KwaZulu-Natal skole wat reeds die PMDP bygewoon het met meer as 17% verbeter. PSA onderhandel tans met ander provinsies om die kursus ook daaraan te bied.
Net hierna die stand van onderwys in Suid-Afrika, is daar nog hoop? Bly ingeskakel. Welkom terug. Ouers, leerlinge en onderwysers van die Santor Hoërskool in Port Elizabeth het vroeër die week die skool se deure gesluit. Dit nadat die Oos-Kaapse Onderwysdepartement steeds nie opdok vir die salarisse van tydelike onderwysers nie. Die skool het 9 tydelike onderwysers wat nog uit die skool se geldkoffers betaal word. Ons senior regisseur in die baie Keith Suister sluit nou telefonies by ons aan. Goeienaand Keith.
Naand en alle kykers.
Keith, hoe lang sukkel die skool aan om hierdie tydelike onderwysers betaal te kry?
Wel, as ons reg kan onthou het ons verlede jaar by die Santor Hoërskool protesoptogte gehad waar die onderwysers, leerlinge en ouers al misnoo aangedui het oor juist dieselfde probleem dat tydelike onderwysers nie betaal was nie en tydelike onderwysers nie in die klasse was nie. Toe die departement van die Oos-Kaapse departement van ons kom en hulle gesê nee, kyk hierdie onderwysers moet terug aan klas toe. Dit het nou gebeur, maar sedert begin van hierdie jaar was daai onderwysers nog nie deur die staat betaal nie en die skool, dis nou Santor as ek kan praat, wat verantwoordelik om vir die meeste van die tyd om hulle salarisse te betaal.
En hoeveel het die skool dan tot dusver gekos om daardie gedeelte van die onderwysers se salarisse te betaal, Keith?
Volgens die skool kos dit hulle omtrent tussen 70.000 en 70.500 rand om elke maand hierdie onderwysers se salarisse te betaal. En dan is dit ook nie die volle salaris van die onderwyser wat betaal word. Dit is maar 'n gedeelte, baie klein gedeelte wat deur die skool se skoolbeheer betaal word, Lenet.
Is dit net geldtekorte wat tot die sluiting van die deure gelei het of is daar ander kwessies ook?
Volgens die departement van onderwys se Modima Manya wat verlede week by die skole draai gemaak het nadat hy verplig was om daarna te kom omdat die onderwysers en die leerlinge en die ouers na die skool gesluit het, is daar nie geld om hierdie onderwysers te betaal nie. So dit is wat hy sê. Daar is nie geld om hulle te betaal nie.
Kief, binne 30 sekondes sê nie kortliks my, wat gaan die departement nou doen?
Wel, hulle het Vrydag weer 'n draai gemaak by die skool en weer beloftes gemaak en gesê dat teen Dinsdag 9uur sal die Wildmoeskaapsdepartement 'n uitsluitsel hê oor wat en hoe hulle daai onderwysers gaan betaal of hulle gaan betaal word en of hulle aangestel gaan word. Teen Dinsdag 9uur sal hulle uitsluitsel hê, Lenet.
Baie dankie vir jou tyd, Keith. Ons bly by onderwysake. Leerders by meer as 400 skole in Suid-Afrika word nog in modder, hout of metaalstrukture onderrig. 'n Verdere 514 skole beskik oor geen sanitêre geriewe nie en meer as 14.000 van hulle het geen biblioteke nie. Die inligting is die afgelope week deur die minister van basiese onderwys, Angie Motshekga, bekend gemaak. Onderwys is een van 9 areas wat in die nasionale ontwikkelingsplan as uitdagings vir die regering geïdentifiseer word. Swak bestuur en 'n groot tekort aan gekwalifiseerde onderwysers word deur kenners as oorsake aangevoer. Dis deesdae nie vreemd om onderwysers, leerders en ouers buite skoolhekke te sien betoog oor swak diens en nalatigheid deur onderwysdepartemente nie. Om oor die probleme en die moontlike oplossings in die onderwyssektor te praat, sluit die onderwyskenner Graham Block vanaand vanuit die Seepunt Ateljee by ons aan. Goeienaand Graham, baie dankie vir jou tyd.
Goeienaand Lenet.
Graham, earlier this week we saw a press release from the academic Mampela Rempela saying South Africa's education system is worse today, and I quote, than the gutter education the country had under the apartheid government. And I want to know if you concur with her assessment of the crisis that we face in South Africa.
Well, I think what Dr. Rampele is saying is that how can we possibly accept these poor outcomes that we're getting from our education system? And I think she's warning that if things carry on, we're heading for another 1976. And I totally agree with her. I think the kids are getting very angry at the way we're stifling opportunities for them. But I think I disagree, and I part ways with her when she says that things are worse now than they were under apartheid. And the figure I always use is that in 1976, only 1/4 of kids even went beyond primary school. In other words, 3/4 of kids didn't even make it to high school. Whereas at the moment, well, kids basically make it to about 10th grade and then they drop out in huge numbers. So clearly our education system is in trouble. We need to be doing things, and I think that's the complex lesson that Mampela Rampela is telling us. Let's speak out about education. And I just want to add there, good luck to Keith. It's not going to come easy, but good luck to what they're doing at Sanctor School there in Port Elizabeth, because it's that kind of activity that stands a chance of getting things right. And clearly, it's a question, is the glass half empty, of is die glas half vol of half leeg? Ek weet nie.
Yeah. You talk about perceptions, and we saw an insert earlier about what effort from principal side have contributed to an improvement in morale and also dedication in KwaZulu-Natal. The Minister of Education says that we're going to require at least 3,000 more schools if we want to address the backlog. Is it really just about more schools, Graham, or is this so intense and so complex that we just don't have enough time to address all of these issues?
Well, it's complex and it's very easy, and I think what the principals showed is that with a lot of effort and a lot of hard work, you can create boundaries and structures that can get results improved within a couple of years. And we saw these schools shooting from 12% under Mr. Mtetwa up to, was it 81%? So, I mean, those are remarkable improvements. And I think they show what can be done, that all over the country there are people, whether it's in the National Planning Commission, whether it's in the schools themselves, whether it's in the departments, whether it's in the NGOs or in the parent sector, I think all over the place, and corporates as well, there are people who really are prepared to make a difference. And of course it will cost us probably more than we're paying, but let's get the systems right first.
I was looking at research and some of the pronouncements that were made during Minister Kader Asmal's, Minister Naledi Pando's ministership of education, and I look at what Angie Motshekga is saying, and I'm asking myself continuously, Graham, what has changed since those pronouncements, since all these great plans were going to be implemented? What has really significantly changed that we can be optimistic about?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. We've got great plans, and the plans now are the right plans, I think, to focus particularly on the foundations of numeracy and of literacy, because it's there we need to start, that our kids can read and our kids can count. I mean, that's what education starts at. But I agree with you. I think we need to make sure that those plans are implemented. I think it's quite complex. I think sometimes the answers we've come up with have not been helpful. There are parents who want to beat kids more whereas I think we beat our kids too much already, even though it's illegal. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done and a lot that people are doing. But the main thing is focus on education, look at the ways you can make a difference, work where you are. And I think if all South Africans come to the party, we're going to see the kind of increases we saw in deep rural schools in KwaZulu-Natal.
Talking about those rural schools who remarkably survive and produce with very limited resources, why do some schools produce and are successful and others don't?
Well, I think the key is always the headmaster or the headmistress, the principal, and the fact that whether it's Bukalani in Soweto, and we've seen Dr. Mate there, or whether it's Dr. Maloto in rural Polokwane, or the teachers we saw in KwaZulu-Natal, it's always principals who organize the teachers, and then teachers who come to the party. And maybe that's also one of the things we've got wrong, is that we've left things in the hands of teachers because allegedly they're experts. They do know a lot about teaching. They are often reaching deep into their pockets to help the children that they want to get through school. But I think we've allowed the unions to let very bad practices creep in. And I think the public at large is very cross with the way in which teachers have risen to the occasion. What we're seeing is that circumstances don't necessarily have to hold you back. That even in the worst circumstances, our children can fly.
Graham, after the break, I want us to talk about how to explore the power, the might of the unions, and also what can be done in those rural areas when we return. Net hierna bly ingeskakel. Welkom terug. Ons sit die gesprek voort oor probleme in die onderwyssektor en moontlike oplossings. Graham, just before the break you mentioned and spoke about the unions that have allowed bad practices. I want you to elaborate on that, because we often find lately that if teachers are dissatisfied with what's happening at school, they take to the streets. In last week, there was a report that indicated that on one day with the return to school, there were about 10,000 teachers absent from our schools. We can't let this continue.
No, we can't let it continue. And I mean, you know, the teacher unions are giants in South Africa. We've got teacher unionism on a scale that is not seen anywhere else in the world. But teacher strikes happen all over the world, so we mustn't be opposed to unions or to the fact that unions have a lot of grievances, especially if we're looking at teacher conditions, at staff rooms, at toilets, at the conditions under which teachers are expected to teach. But I think this is not England, where the teachers are about to go on strike because they're getting cutbacks. They're about to oppose the government. This is not England. We have a government that is allegedly sympathetic and wants to do the same thing. So I think the unions need to look at ways of coming on board. And that, for me, is the question, is how do we get the unions on board rather than how do we confront the unions and simply go head-to-head with the unions, which I think will result in a lot of destabilization. And I don't think it reflects where the teachers are, but teachers are responsible for who they elect.
Are we doing enough to sufficiently address the issues of bad management at schools? If we look at teacher training, the qualified and unqualified teachers, or underqualified even, about 70,000 teachers that need to be trained to even slightly address the need in our schools.
Look, mostly teachers are getting the qualification, so it's not a qualification issue, it's a teaching issue. And I think the problem is that often the department is not able to provide support. So it falls back on things like performance agreements, which sounds nice, but it doesn't necessarily enhance the accountability that we want to see in the system. We do want increased accountability, but it needs to come from increased support and from giving the help that principals will ultimately need. Many of the principals are doing the job well, and let's let them get on with it and find those teachers who need help and give them assistance, whether from government or from NGOs or from corporates, or as we saw in the clip, from corporates getting together with government and designing great programs.
For teachers or school principals watching now and who feel slightly overwhelmed, there's a toolkit that you often refer to for best practice in school governance. Can you briefly touch on that?
Well, there's a departmental pamphlet on school governing bodies, but more than that, I think there are organizations like the grouping in KwaZulu-Natal. I know in Wits in Gauteng, there's a principal training course. The University of Johannesburg has been doing networks with principals. So I think there's and looking at leadership. So there's a range of alternatives. And I think the best thing is for teachers to make contact with the universities where the training happens and move from there, both in pre-teaching, before they become teachers, and also in service teaching. We need assistance.
I saw your comments earlier in the week on the SABC about why we are so angry, that documentary. And one of the things that you pointed out, which I found quite interesting and poignant, was that we are reproducing inequalities in South Africa, particularly in our education system. How do we stop it from henceforth?
Well, I fight with the children because the younger generation don't like to hear anything about race. But the reality is that if you're a white kid, you'll probably get through matric, and 60% of you will go on to university. Whereas if you're a black kid, half of you won't even make it to matric. Maybe 12 to 15% will go on to university. So how do we stop that? We make sure the township and the rural schools produce the outcomes that we expect, and that poor kids have got as much chance as kids in the better off suburbs.
Do you foresee
Easy
that...
to say, but a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it sounds very disheartening, I have to tell you, Graham, but I'm wondering, is it then likely that more of us, and those who can afford it, and even those who's trying to scrape money together, will find their way to private schools because they find that there's more hope, a better chance of actually making a living in South Africa?
Lynette, things are getting better, but it's far too slow, I agree with you. And other countries are not waiting for us. Private schools, we've got a lot to learn from independent schools. I've been to schools like Redham and Abbott's and seen great things they're doing. But you know, even if they double from 5% of the schools to 10%, even to 15 or 20% of the schools, it still means the majority of kids are in the poor, rural and township schools. So it's really there we have to look for solutions. As I said, it's there where our future will be written. And it's there where kids are, where poor kids are, and where they need to learn to shoot for the stars and grab the opportunities that come their way.
Are you convinced that we have the political will to make this happen?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Are you convinced that we have the political will to make this happen?
Well, I think political will as South Africans means we've got to keep a lot of pressure on our political leadership. And let's not wait for Angie Mashega or any of the MECs in the province to do their job. So yes, if you look at the amount of people, whether it's University of Johannesburg or Symphonia or Bridge or Wits University or the Model C schools, the ex-Model Cs, yes, South Africans do have the political will. Sometimes they don't have the political leadership they deserve.
Yeah. Graham, unfortunately, that's where we'll have to leave it for this evening. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lynn.
Dit was dan vanaand se Fokus. Kykers se kommentaar en voorstelle is altyd welkom. Skryf net die woord Fokus gevolg deur 'n kort boodskap en SMS dit na 34444. 'n SMS kos R2 en u kan gerus ook 'n lid word van ons Fokus groep op Facebook. Nou Fokus regisseur Karen Dolwiel besoek binnekort die Khoi en die San gemeenskappe om te hoor wat hulle as inheemse minderheidsgroepe van die regering verlang. Mense wat hul stem wil laat hoor, kan ons kontak telefonies per e-pos of gemaak het op ons Facebookblad. Laat die kommentaar daar. Van my Lynette Francis en die res van die Fokusspan, totsiens tot volgende Sondag aand.